Thank you. City of Kingston's Common Council at our Special Housing Committee meeting. Today is Thursday, August 13th. My name is Andrea, the Council President and organizer for our virtual meetings. Before we begin, we'd like to go over a few guidelines to help us navigate the system as efficiently and respectfully as possible. We ask that members of the public and press remain muted and off camera for the length of the meeting. As organizer, I reserve the right to mute anyone who unmutes themselves. Council members and city staff will control their own mute button. Good practice would be to mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid background noise and feedback. If a council member or staff wishes to speak, they will raise their hands. The chairperson will call on them before they speak by stating their name clearly for our audio listeners. All of our meetings are recorded. Both video and written transcriptions will be made available to the public on the city's website. Although we will not have public speaking tonight, you can submit written comments to the City of Kingston Clerk, Elisa Tinty, at emtinty@kingston-ny.gov, or by dropping them off at the drop box located outside the side door of City Hall. We also encourage you to reach out to committee chairs or your ward's representative at any time. If you have any audio issues, send a text message to the following number, 914-466-8092. As the organizer for today's meeting, I reserve the right to lock and pause the meeting to eject anyone who has behaved inappropriately. Lastly, at tonight's meeting, we have in attendance Chair Alderman Rennie Scott Childress, Alderwoman Michelle Hirsch, Alderman Don Tollerman, and city staff, we have Housing Director Michael Gilliard. Thank you for your patience, and on behalf of the Common Council, I wish you and your family good health. And I now turn the floor over to Chair Alderman Rennie Scott Childress.
Hello, everyone. Caller one. Rennie Scott Childress here. We have with us our committee tonight. Our main topic of conversation is going to be short-term rental regulation, but Michael Gilliard has been kind enough to join us, and I was asking him if he would give us an update on where we are with the land bank.
I'd be happy to. This is Mike Gilliard, the Executive Director of the Kingston City Land Bank. Thank you for inviting me to your meeting. I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of see what everyone is up to and tell you what I'm up to. So at the Land Bank, we have a lot going on. I think since I last spoke at this meeting, which may have been in mid-May, I think, or maybe I spoke again in June, but you're probably aware we acquired 3 properties on July 8th from the city. Those are 3 single-family homes, and then immediately began the process of some landscaping. If you go to one of the homes at 174 Hasbrook, you went there last week, it looks very different than what it looks like this week. 248 Main and 64 Van Buren both have landscaping contracts in place, so you should see regular upkeep and general maintenance of the properties. That leads into the process of securing contractors to really undertake the actual construction work to rehabilitate these homes. So you may notice, I think it will come out later today in a publication, the mayor's newsletter, he will highlight the fact that we have just published our request for qualifications for contractors. It's listed in the Freeman as of tomorrow. In the print edition, it's listed in the Freeman online as of today. So I believe that's a good opportunity and a nice first step to try to engage members of the public, not necessarily just local, but the contracting community in general, to get them interested in what will then become a request for proposals for that work. So that's what's going on with the first 3 homes. Simultaneously, we undertook environmental investigation, which would be it's called phase 1, and title reports for the next 5 homes, next 5 properties that we would be looking at. Those are coming in this week. So far, they're looking good, knock on wood. And then right behind that, we have an additional 5 properties behind that that would be part of phase 3. So we're currently looking at 10 properties. We've acquired 3, and request for qualifications is out. That's the construction progress. On other fronts, there are many other things. I wouldn't want to spoil it for the board meeting, but we have a lot going on in terms of internal governance and structure. At our last meeting, we were able to pass committee charters, which are reasonable, normal, and customary for each of our committees. But it's kind of the final piece of our internal governance rework, just to get everyone on the same page and organize internally. So I feel like we're in a good place on that as well. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Any questions? Michelle, then Don.
Yeah, hi. I was wondering when the next board meeting was. I know I was going to try to be like a liaison to your meetings, but they were kind of hitting up against caucus, I think, like on Monday nights or something. But
Of course,
time?
we would love to have you be present at our meetings. I believe it is a Monday night, and it's not even on my calendar yet. So if I could check with Caitlin, who schedules the events, and just write you.
Thanks.
Cool. Thanks. It's the end of this month, I believe. But
Okay, thank you.
yep, you're welcome.
Great, on.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Don.
Are there new properties coming your way? Anything new on the horizon?
We're evaluating 5 properties with title and phase 1 reports coming in this week, next week-ish. They take 3 to 4 weeks to complete. And then behind that, we're evaluating another 5. So we're currently evaluating 10 properties.
And are any of those exciting? Like more than just,
All exciting.
you know what I mean?
They're all exciting. In what sense? I think that what we're trying
A great location or a larger, larger lot for some, some density and some multifamily housing opportunity.
no multifamily housing opportunities, unfortunately, just due to kind of where our business model, I think, is working best. We're focusing on single family homes for the rehabs, for the affordable home ownership. With this next round, we're trying to work in clusters. 5 homes isn't necessarily a neighborhood changing cluster, but we are looking at 3 contiguous properties. We're also looking at homes that may be non-conforming to the type of work that we see ourselves doing in the near term, but from a long-term kind of mission standpoint, they might be properties that fit within that. But that's kind of a long-winded way of answering your question. But I think they're all exciting. I think it's going to be very challenging to develop 5 homes for affordable home ownership in the time frame that it's needed, which is immediate. But we're trying to focus on homes that we think are relatively straightforward in terms of construction. That's,
And do you still have the same person in place to head up your construction efforts?
I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
Who's heading up your construction efforts? I met the person at City Hall about 8 months ago. I don't think, is he still with us? That he was going to work on the construction?
So there was previously a rehab housing specialist who was working with the land bank. That person is no longer employed with the city. So there is not a rehab housing specialist. We did put out a request for consulting services to cover the scoping phase of the work, and unfortunately couldn't find someone within our budget. And so we took on the scoping ourselves. So the scoping phase has been done essentially without adding any additional costs or staff resources. We do recognize
Is that you doing a lot of that work?
myself and the board chair, who has single family home rehab experience, is kind of what he does. So when we really do so we've issued a request for qualifications to solicit interest from the contracting community. When we get to the stage where we are soliciting a request for proposals, I believe it's quite prudent to bring on, either on a consulting basis or on a salary basis through the land bank, a owner's rep / construction project manager. I believe that's the time to do it. So we're holding off as long as we can just due to costs, but we would be putting that, coming up with a new resource for that.
Would you have to find new funds to pay for that owner's rep?
We currently, I think, had some savings from the reduction in staff previously, so that would be what that would go towards. But we're always looking for funding. At the next board meeting, we will be passing a charter for a fundraising committee and setting some targets around that with our strategic planning that's going on later this month. So nothing on the city side. We're not asking for any more funding from the city.
For now. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Michael, I thought you were going to say next board meeting you were passing the hat. I was going to say, well, that's starting to go well. Okay.
Not a bad idea.
Brent, start with Rennie.
I got a pocket full of change. Let's go. All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Anything else on that? Michelle, you're good? Okay. So as we've been looking at short-term rental regulation possibilities, I've developed a set of about 11 different parameters. So I was hoping that we could at least start with these tonight and work our way through so we can get a sense of whether the 3 of us are on the same page, whether we have some very different ideas, how we might think through this so that we begin to knock this down to an actual piece of legislation that we can present to other members of the council, the mayor, as well as all the different stakeholders in the city. So the first one has to do with what do we think is the general purpose we are pursuing in considering short-term rental regulations. Examples here might be, if our main aim is revenue, that would suggest certain kinds of regulations. Are we really looking at quality of life? Are we looking to increase the number of visitors who have overnight options here in town, or other things? So I'm wondering if the two of you have a sense here of our general purpose. What do you really want to accomplish with any short-term regulations? Yes, Michelle.
I think a main goal for me would be that we are, by creating short-term rental housing legislation, we're protecting our housing stock so that we have available housing within the city for, homeowners and families.
For permanent families, you mean?
Yes.
What do you mean, Michelle, by limiting the number of rentals, therefore allowing for more ownership?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's critical.
And we need permanent residents that live here, not just vacationers. We have a housing shortage. We need housing, so.
We're being besieged by people moving up out of the city right now. I'm sure you've all seen the Bloomberg article about
Which one is that?
that Kingston is the number one location in the entire country for the rising values post-COVID in the country. We're it. Pretty extraordinary.
And are we sure that those folks who are moving here, does the article say anything about they're moving here themselves to live here, or they're seeing speculation properties?
I think it's speculation. Oh, no, I think they're moving here. This is the, I got to get out of Manhattan or Brooklyn crowd that's, but needs to be within striking distance of the city. And Kingston is it's a rising tide, all around us. This is happening in the suburbs, in Westchester, in Rockland, and Orange also. But we are the hottest spot of all.
For me, I think, given when I've talked with members of Ward 3, their main concern has really been quality of life, because we've had a couple of issues where we've had a short-term rental property that was supposedly managed, by not the homeowner. The homeowner did not actually live in the property, and that led to a number of uncomfortable incidents with neighbors. So
Sure.
I would definitely want to look at quality of life and how we think about integrating any short-term rentals with the way the permanent homeowners, permanent renters are living in the city.
I have to agree with that, Rennie. That's right on. I have neighbors that are short-term, that have short-term rentals, and it's very different. The dynamic with the people who are staying there really does affect the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. And then, don't you have a bed and breakfast on your block also?
I do, yes. It's
Is
called
there
the breakfast.
Do you sense a distinction between the guests there versus the short-term rental guests?
Yes, well, they walk the streets, they're just unfamiliar faces walking the streets, and there's nothing detrimental about it except that they don't add to our community. So, but they don't take away necessarily. It's not like they're kids throwing parties. Really, on my block, not only do I have the Kingston Bed and Breakfast, but I have two dedicated Airbnbs that people have set up. So it's every day of the year it's an Airbnb. So I've been watching how that unfolds. It's worked very well for the owners, and again, for the residents, I don't think it's been a detriment, but it certainly hasn't. It's not additive, of course, because they just are transient.
Okay. I'm sorry. I should have provided a concern at the very beginning, and that is we need to talk in terms of short-term rentals, not any particular company, partly because there's actually more types of short-term rentals than those necessarily listed by any particular
Sure.
provider. So, sorry, I should have mentioned that at the beginning.
To answer your first question, Rennie,
Yeah.
revenue to our city is really on my mind. That we are missing an opportunity to have some housing tax that is so many other communities are enjoying.
Uh-huh.
Just like a hotel housing tax.
Yes.
Don't we already have that? We kind of are, that goes, we can't double tax them. The county takes a tax. Like, they would have to get a license, right? And be licensed.
The county charges 2% per night. That's payable by the unit owner directly. And but I'm pretty sure that we can impose our own tax. There's no, and I've seen, like, for example, I was looking at Toronto, Canada. They impose a 5% tax.
Dennis Doyle's presentation have comps, comparables on what other local cities or towns are charging.
Uh-huh. We could do that.
Good.
Okay. I'm just writing this down. Good. Okay. So the next issue has to do with there are different purposes for short-term rentals. So one purpose and different types of short-term rentals. Some are geared much more towards, say, vacationing. And so the tendency there is for them to be a few days or a week. They generally have a shorter period of time. Some other ones might be geared toward a relatively short period of time for workers who are coming to town to do a project of a month, 2 months. And then there's different other kinds of, I guess, for lack of a better word, structures. So say houseboats along the river, those are not quite the same thing as an apartment building or a standalone house. So one of the things to consider is, do we want to allow short-term rentals in all types of buildings or only some? Do you have any, do we want to limit it to, single-family homes only, for example? Do we allow one or more units in a larger structure? That sort of thing. Yes, Michelle.
My feeling is, regarding the boats and other situations, I don't think that we should have any short-term rentals in any sort of place that isn't controlled by the building department and wouldn't be subject to inspections.
Right, but I would guess that if they do offer, this would be a little bit like rentals. If they do short-term rentals there, and we have a requirement, an inspection requirement, which is one of the later questions, then they would have to be subject to that. But your point is taken. If it's a I guess, non-traditional sort of place. So.
Well, you mentioned boats, Rennie. They're not they would not be regulated at all, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. They might be. They would be if we decide that any short-term rental regulation anywhere, no matter the structure, has to be inspected. Then those would have to be inspected, right? I mean, that would be up to us to decide.
There's a lot to consider here. A lot, I mean, I think we should. Do you guys agree? No commercial buildings should allow short-term rentals.
What do you mean by commercial buildings?
Obvious. You could have a a retail space. It could be a small building with residential upstairs and retail downstairs. It would be a shame for that retail to become just, a short-term rental. Or conversely, you could take a commercial building, just an empty, a two-story office building or a one-story office building that a owner, can't find a commercial tenant. Do we care if it is converted to short-term rental? That's, I think, a fair question. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. My concern there was that I believe technically an apartment building is considered a commercial building. So, we would want to distinguish. And so you said retail, and that gives I think a narrower slice of what a clearer idea of what you're talking about.
And also, distinction with the basements and attics.
Well, again, I think that all comes under what the building department would issue for, like occupancy, like a permit of occupancy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if they say it's okay, then it's okay. Even if it's a garage.
Well, we can put it that way, or we can, if as long as the regulations that we consider pass legal muster, we have the power to determine some of these things. So, so I've got no retail commercial buildings, no commercial spaces converted to short-term regulations, no places like basements or attics. So basically, no place that building safety would otherwise not consider a livable space.
Right. You're not saying no to these things, right? You're just saying that building safety would need to inspect and approve.
Well, I own a home. I can't let my children sleep in the basement or the attic. It's like against, code for the city of Kingston. I can't.
No, but you could modify it and put in windows and another egress, and the building department might okay it.
And then there'd have to be.
That actually brings up the planning board, because currently we have certain regulations about there is the potential to transform a basement space into a living space, but there are some definite limitations there of size, ingress, egress, and that sort of thing. So we may want to actually ask the planning board for their opinion on some of these things. All right.
Randy, what's the purpose of our conversation right now? Is it just to sort of flesh out some of the issues, or to try to grapple with them and, make recommendations?
Yes. The basic idea is that we're looking at the different parameters here. If the three of us can...
You stopped. You broke up, Rennie. Rennie, can't hear you. Andrew, I think Rennie has self-destruct.
It's on his end here, so I don't think there's anything I could do.
I know. Can he be replaced?
I sent him a text message just in case.
We should have an Android ready for such situations to replace us.
Do we have a list of parameters? I'm not sure. I didn't get to ask him if this was something he emailed us.
Yeah, Dennis Doyle's presentation really covered all of the issues.
He laid out parameters. He didn't say what to do. So this is what we want to do. We want to, like I said, if all three of us agreed on every single point tonight, we could create legislation here tonight. If not, or if there's information that we need to gather further, that's what we need to do. And then start talking to other folks too about what to get done here. So some of this is philosophical. Some of it is much more practical. So again, it goes with this idea of, our general purpose. So my next parameter here is, do we want to think about the same rules across the city or have different districts or types of neighborhoods? So for example, we could say that we believe that short-term rentals should only be in residential homes. The next question has to do with owner-occupied, but we might say, they could be in apartment buildings, they can be in different kinds of buildings, or rather different neighborhoods across the city.
I think that we can't, I think they should just be we can't, I'm sorry, I can't think of the word, limit them. I think they need to, what's the purpose of limiting them? Why would we limit them?
Why would we?
The question more is about whether or not they should be owner occupied or not owner occupied.
Right, that's the next question, though. This one has to do more with, if we're talking about quality of life, one rule we could make is that they can't be in, residential neighborhoods. They can only be in tourist districts. So that would be, in a sense, creating zones where we say it's okay to have these. If we say, well, we're going to have the same rules across the entire city, that's fine, too. It's just a question of how we want this to look when it's all said and done. So,
well, I'm personally
Go ahead.
I'm personally in favor of owner occupied, or so that there's more control over the quality of life issues, or that the owner lives within a certain mile radius. So that they can help control quality of life issues that may come up if they.
I think that's a great point, Michelle, because certainly the biggest problem with our housing stock is absentee landlords who don't give a damn and let the homes go to waste, go to crap. But if if not owner occupied, at least living within city limits or within, our area, I think that does make a difference.
Okay.
And it also cuts down on, the businesses, in, it's an industry now, market, Airbnbs. It's not, mom and pop renting out a couple rooms anymore. It's, companies that are owning, large amounts of stock in various communities.
By the way, Michael, I think if you want to comment or join, I think we'd all welcome your participation if you have any thoughts on this.
This is Mike. I appreciate the opportunity, but I would be over my skis to have any more than a personal opinion on it. But
You don't think that's where we are?
What's that phrase about not opening your mouth unless people know the difference? That's me.
That's okay. Yep. Thanks.
Okay, so I get the sense that the idea of that we would limit this, in a sense, we don't want there to be commercial short-term rental enterprises in Kingston where you've got a company that's simply buying up lots of units around town and making them available without well, in that sort of way. And that what we would much prefer is that we're thinking of this to some degree as a way for small owners to make extra money, right? So a homeowner who's got space would be able to, yeah.
Yep. No, I'm with you. It's to help our people. It's to help our people make a few extra dollars without damaging our neighborhoods and our environment. We don't want to have, multinational companies coming in here and, buying up and establishing 30 or 40 these, purely money-making ventures. That's not the spirit of our town, and that's not the spirit of our council.
Okay, great.
And I'm in favor of, it being one family homes or two family homes being used. So they are going to end up in residential areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
So,
I think
the owner occupied or within a certain radius, then.
do you guys have, are you guys concerned about the number of them? Like, is there a point at which it's just too many? Like, we talked about the downside with home ownership. Michelle brought up that, we want to encourage home ownership and not lose our potential homes to Airbnbs. So should there be a limit as to how many we are allowed?
That's one of those questions that is important to consider, but it can have an unintended consequence, which is if you set the number too low, you end up, with that becoming a prize. Then, people, it's like the taxi medallions down in New York City. You inflate the prize in a sense for the fees. We could look at that. I forgot. Does anybody remember the number? Were we talking about below 100 short-term rental units in Kingston at the current time?
I think it was near that number, 113 or something like that.
I thought it was more.
Well, there was a county number, then there was a city number.
Yeah, so I would say this might be something to investigate a little further. This idea of limiting the total number.
Brandy, I'd like to know how they know where that data comes from.
Because the county requires, because they have the tax, they require the tax be paid, and they also I don't know if they do it directly or if they hire a company, but they can go through and find all the different short-term rental regulation units that are being advertised, so they can track those down. But
how many are under the radar? Not people not telling and registering as such. Is it hard to do?
I'm sorry, what did you say? I was distracted a second.
Is it hard to cheat? In other words, is there a sub-market of units that are not registered that people just don't tell anybody about? And
I don't know whether to be complimented or insulted that you're asking me about how easy it is to cheat. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm just telling you what Dennis. This is what I remember Dennis telling us, is that those are the two ways that they find out where they are. I'm sure there's some way to do it sub rosa. There might be an informal network, but I just don't know.
What does sub rosa mean?
Under the radar. Sorry.
Is that Latin?
Yeah, I'm guessing. I don't know.
I'm checking in.
What about then the next parameter that I have here is a limit to the length of stay. Some places they're really serious about short term, so they'll say a week or 2 weeks. Other places I've seen up to a half a year. Some even longer than that. Any feel for that at this point?
I'm sorry, about regulating the amount of time?
the number of nights that somebody could stay in one continuous rental.
I'm in favor of 30 days because after that it's
It's a rental.
yeah, it's a rental, a month-to-month rental.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my reaction is the same, but I'd like to hear the other side to it. I'm sure there's an argument for a longer term, a long term.
So you're curious about what the argument would be for the longer term?
Yeah, but on the surface, I agree with Michelle that sounds right. That it should be limited to 30 days because otherwise it's another thing. You know, it's like then it makes it too easy. Then you're taking away from our rental market, right? If you allow more than 30 days, you know, then that apartment's not available for a rental, and when these people, it also seems like they're getting over on the rental market because they're, yeah. I don't want to get over my skis, but it just, I would vote at this point for keeping it to 30, limiting it to 30 days.
This relates a little bit to one of the definitions that I've seen about short-term rentals is that they are furnished units. So, you know, once you get over that 30-day time period, you start to get into this question of whether somebody would be offering something that's furnished for that longer period of time or not. What about a limit to the number of renters at any one time? This would relate to a limit to the number of, you know, units in any one building. But if we're talking about, you know, number of renters, there's different ways of approaching that.
I'm not sure what you mean, number of renters. So in other words, can one unit have 6 people in it? Is that what you're
Right.
saying?
Or I've seen some things that say, you know, up to 4 non-related people, up to a family of 6 people, what have you. It's one of the ways of trying to limit specifically on that quality of life issue.
I mean, I would think the owner, go ahead.
I think it needs to be fleshed out around like how many bedrooms are available and then how many people may occupy a bedroom.
And this seems to me like overregulation, because if I'm an owner of a unit, you know, that's meant for 2, I don't want 6 people in there. You know, it's just going to degrade my unit. And I don't think we would need to put these limits on. But
Okay.
I think there needs to be a limit because then it turns into a quality of life. So say you have like a small cottage in a residential neighborhood that's a short-term rental that really only has 1 bedroom, but then there's renting it out to 8 people and just packing it in, and you have a bunch of college kids in there.
okay.
We may want to talk with building safety on that one also, because there may be current rules in general, but I don't know of any particular. So the next one relates directly to what you all just were alluding to, and that is, do we want to limit an abstract limit, I should say, to the number of rooms allowed in any one structure? So in other words, you know, you could say only 1 unit per structure, no matter how big it is, or 10% of the units, or 10% of the floor space, or what have you.
Right.
Prefer to, again, just limit it to like one single family or 2 family homes, because otherwise we could have, you know, complete apartment buildings that could be short-term rentals. And
Right, but so if you've got an apartment building with 10 units, would you still limit it to 1 unit, or allow them to do up to 2 units, say, for short-term rentals, and the other ones be long-term?
I think an apartment building should just be an apartment building.
So that would be no short-term rental units in apartment buildings.
What's the idea? You know the Strand down in Rondout? What's up with that? What is that classified as? Do you know?
You mean that 4-unit building down there on Beale Street?
It's no, it looks like much more than 4 units. Yes, it's on a Beale, right, where it meets Broadway. They've been working on it for a few years.
Is that a Beale?
I think so. It's a
I
short-term
don't know.
housing. They advertise as short-term stays.
I'm not familiar with the particular building you're talking about.
It's called Strand House.
And it's all short-term rental units?
Yes.
So, well, there's another one that's it's on a Beale at Hone Street, I think, and someone renovated that building, and I think it's 4 units, but all 4 are short-term rental units.
Okay.
So, I mean, that would be another question, which is, so with a building like that, do we introduce a grandfather clause for those kind of buildings? Somebody renovated it specifically for short-term rental units. I'm pretty sure we have the power to say that we wouldn't grandfather those in, but, you know, would that be a question of equity in some way?
I'm not in favor of grandfathering, but
You're not in favor?
no.
I think people bought these buildings for investment. You know,
Jill, do you have an opinion one way or the other?
I think I would like to know the actual number that are registered at this point with the county and what that all looks like.
Okay. So I can write Dennis Doyle and ask him for more of these figures.
I think this is where we sort of enter a boondoggle because I think that there's a lot here already, and how do we, get a handle on it? And
Randy,
Okay.
I think I'm looking at the website, and I think you're right. It is only 4 units at the Strand House.
Okay.
They're large. Beautiful.
So I see we've got about 10 minutes. Let me just tell you what the other 4 questions are, and if there's one in particular that you all want to speak to. I mean, we might be able to get through all 4 of them, but just let me go through them so you can choose. One of them has to do with whether we would require regular registration by the owner of the units. Another one would be whether we would license and then charge fees to the short-term rental companies. That is, the companies that provide the connection between the provider and the renter. Another one would be the question of annual or biannual or other kind of inspection. And then the question of a registration fee or a tax.
Well, I'm all for that tax, as I mentioned.
I think we should be, they should have permits, they should have applications and permits and inspections and fees.
there's a whole long history on this of trying to do registration and them not registering. And
Right.
I think it'd be really worth your while to have a conversation with some of these Airbnbs. Like the Forsyth was registered and was paying, but then they realized nobody else was. And then during COVID, they were like, I'm not paying this money anymore. Nobody else is.
Uh-huh.
Is the Forsyth is an Airbnb? So does that fall into the same category? I'm sorry, not an Airbnb, a bed and breakfast or a traditional bed and breakfast.
Well, at the county level, they charge all overnight rental facilities a 2% tax. And so they define Airbnb the same as a motel, the same as a short-term rental for those purposes.
Okay.
But since they usually at a bed and breakfast, they're also serving food. I don't know if that then requires a different level of inspection, like from the county health inspector, for example, since they're serving food.
Right.
So that might be another thing to consider.
I think that it's if you're offering like outside dining, like to people. I think like a bed and breakfast is only serving breakfast.
Yeah.
But started serving dinners and things like that. I think that required a new kitchen and health inspection. I'm not sure about that, but there's a long history here.
This is really, there's a lot to think about here.
Yeah, that's why we want to get started. So I think then we want to talk about some kind of well, if we're going to be charging fees and or taxes, there has to be some kind of registration, because that would be the point at which that gets paid and gets registered with the city. Then the question there would have to be, what are the administrative costs of charging, of
Enforcing.
of taking care of. Yes, Michelle.
Well, I'm thinking that it should go through the building department. Like there should be an application process, then that, and then they have an inspection by the building department before any permits are issued.
Mm-hmm. But would they be the proper point for taking in the fees, for example, or the taxes? Because it seems like that would go through the comptroller.
Yeah, I think like the building department has to be involved in the inspections. I don't know who best would. Like the building department does have, a registration for landlord. So could they also then have a registration for,
Right.
Short-term rentals?
Okay.
Because I imagine the inspection process needs to be similar.
Yeah,
Like
I wonder if
how long would the short-term rental have a permit for? Is it a 1 year or 2 year? Do they get inspected before renewals on the permits? So would we charge to have a permit for them to have a permit? And then would there be a separate bed tax?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this would be one way of trying to figure out what the proper fees and taxes would be, so that we're actually, we absolutely need to cover our costs, but the idea would also be to be able to produce the revenues that would help us generate further income, either via tourism or what have you. Okay.
Well, also to cover any additional work, with inspections, the building departments, any other departments that would be involved.
Right. Yes. Good. Okay. All right. We've got just a couple of minutes left, and I want to be very sensitive to our time here. So, I will take up what we've talked about so far and send it out to everyone tomorrow. Are there any last issues, though? Any last points that you feel like haven't been made that you want to get in here before we break?
Sort of some language or ideas around revoking a permit.
Okay. Yep. And look for some models for that. Anything else?
I guess there's going to be like language, I guess, also for an appeal process, or, you know, for anyone that loses.
And enforcement.
Yeah.
And we'll discuss enforcement.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, this is the beginning here. And so I will put this together. I will look for any things that appear to be places where we're largely in agreement, and then places where there's still questions or research to do. And we will look at this again very soon. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
The procedure? Yes. Okay. Great. So anything else then relating to housing anybody wants to say for tonight? We got 90 seconds. All right, then. I will
Our
say,
next meeting is the 27th, August 27th.
yes.
I'm actually going to be on vacation that week, so I will not be here. So I don't know.
Well, maybe what we can do is get somebody to sit in for you.
Okay.
Because I would like for these to be regular so that, everybody knows to expect them.
Right. I'm not saying canceled. I'm just giving you a heads up that I'm not available.
Yes. Gotcha. I just, I hear you. So can you take care of asking somebody else in to sit in for you, or do you want me to do that? Okay, great. Are you going somewhere nice?
Don't know yet.
Okay. I was wondering if you were going to do a staycation. I'm not sure I'm in favor of those, but anyway. All right. So thank you to everybody for showing up tonight. Always good to see you. And I look forward to discussing this more and turning into some bona fide legislation sometime here in the near future.
Excellent.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you, Andrea, for setting this up.
Anytime. Thanks. Have a nice night.
Bye-bye.
You too.